You know, and part of that, somebody who regularly goes to a firing range, and we're talking about indoor firing ranges, not outdoor firing ranges, where you know, where we're dependent on the ventilation of the range to reduce the exposure. Most people who use these ranges on a regular basis are not testing themselves. I mean, you have to ask your doctor for a blood lead test. Their doctor's not going to do it as part of a routine physical. It's something you have to ask for. And part of that is, even those people who are, going back to the issue of kids, even those people who are testing themselves are not testing their children. So this whole issue of bringing lead home on your clothes, your shoes, people who are testing themselves because of exposure in a firing range are not testing their own children.
Mm-hmm. I don't think anywhere in print does it, you know, when you go into a firing range either, there's nothing posted because they obviously want you to be there and frequent their location, so they're not leading us in the right direction either. So even just the shooter that goes out periodically isn't getting that information. And without a program like ours, it seems like they're not going to get that information. And it is a great concern.
Well, a lot of that probably goes back to the fact that if you were an employee, you have hazard communication rules that says the employer has the responsibility to tell you about the hazards of the chemicals that you work around, whereas if you are just Joe consumer out there in the public, you don't have that responsibility. That owner of that shop doesn't have that responsibility to do that for you. And so you have that responsibility to figure that out for yourself, and a lot of people don't figure that out in a lot of cases. And so we have a responsibility to try and educate the public in whichever way we can. A lot of things also, Ken talked a lot, as well as Dr. George here talked about blood lead monitoring for people going to shooting ranges, other things that can be done as far as trying to control blood lead exposures. If you're a sports hobbyist, somebody who likes to make your own bullet rounds, somebody who likes to make your own fishing lures or things of that particular nature, don't do this in your house. Don't do it in your basement. Don't do it indoors in your house where you're utilizing the ventilation system in your house, the HVAC system in your house, because you're transporting that molten lead that you're heating up in your melting pot. You're transporting this throughout your house, and you're now contaminating all the living areas in your house, okay? And that includes your children's living areas. You're going to want to do this outside, either in a garage, preferably in an outbuilding. That would be a preference there.
Cleaning your guns too.
Cleaning your guns, I would do something like that, again, outside of the living area of my home. That would be a preference there also. Things as far as going to a gun range, we noticed on the video there, the gun range that they went to, one of the first questions I would ask if I was going to go to an indoor gun range, has the gun range done any air monitoring to verify whether or not the ventilation system does actually control the airborne lead exposure in that gun range? Just like I talked about a few minutes ago in the story with the Michigan State Police gun range, where we actually came in and did air monitoring to verify whether or not the system that we installed did control the airborne lead exposures. There are monitoring procedures that can be done to verify that that system is working, and it should be done on a periodic basis to verify that yes, this indeed is functioning properly. Other things that also need to be looked at, you know, are they properly filtering the air before it's being emitted to the atmosphere? That's something that Department of Environmental Quality, the Air Quality Division, is going to be very interested in, because you're emitting a toxic hazard to the atmosphere. And if you've got a daycare center next door, there's all kinds of stories about that.
You could see the smoke. You'd hear the media would get involved, but since you can't see what's going on, it's a little bit more difficult for people to get involved. And I think one of the things too, a good friend of ours many years ago, a firearm instructor, Gila Mae Hayes, she's also a famous author of several firearm books. She had opened a firing range in Washington State. Her and her husband, who is law enforcement, by the way, he became, shortly after that, she informed me that he became very seriously ill with lead poisoning. Now, this was several years ago that I had heard about it, and even myself didn't take, an avid concern about it because I had not really physically felt any symptoms. But after reading all these articles, I'm looking at, well, yeah, I am kind of tired a lot, and some of those things I feel that I could even be affected by it. With my lead level testing, I was at like 14, and now recently it's gone down a little bit. My doctor was concerned about it, but when I talked to several other doctors that were in the field, they said that's, if you're not experiencing a lot of symptoms, not to really worry about it. And if you go to, like you were saying, Dr. Roseman, that if you go to your doctor, a lot of doctors are not really aware of the problem, and unless you ask to be tested, they're not even looking at that as being a problem. They'll tell you, well, it's stress, it's something else that's going on in your life.